ask the kids to make your way to kids' church this morning. Just want to introduce, we're going to be starting a new series next week. And the new series is called The First Christmas. And this is going to be a little bit longer series. It's going to be 6 weeks taking us through the Christmas season. But I would really encourage you to be here. The one thing about Christmas is there's many amazing things, but the one thing about Christmas is that people, more than any other time of the year besides Easter, probably are open to coming to church on Christmas. And so I would really, really encourage you to take some invite cards from the front or from the back and find somebody and invite them to church this Christmas. And we're going to be talking and looking at the Christmas story from different perspectives, from different people that were at the Christmas story. There's going to be video each week, and a series is starting next week. And actually, Pastor Natasha will be starting our series for us next week, as I will be away. No tears. I will be away next week in New York. And so please, yes, wow. I'll be away in New York, so please keep that in mind for next Sunday. Our series kicks off, and it's going to be amazing. So thank you so much for coming to church this morning. We're working our way through a series on Haggai. And I myself, I can only speak for me, but for myself, I've really, really enjoyed this series on Haggai. I think most of us probably haven't spent a lot of time reading the book of Haggai. It's just a small little book, just a couple of pages. But it's an amazing, amazing story. If you've missed the last 2 weeks, I'll just give you a little bit of backstory. In 587 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar was in rule, and the Babylonians marched on Judah. They destroyed the temple, and they took the Israelites captive for 5 decades, for 50 years. And that's a long time. This week I turned 42. That's 8 years longer than my whole life. So they were captive for 50 years. 50 years later, when Israel was finally allowed to go back home and rebuild, they were all excited. Can you imagine being in jail or in captivity for 50 years? And then all of a sudden be able to get out and be home. They were so excited. But then they met opposition from the Samaritans. And the Samaritans stood up against them. And they quit. How many have ever quit because you've got opposition? When things get tough, you say, oh, you know what, maybe not. Maybe I won't go any farther. I think we all have. Usually it happens around January 1st through January 6th. And so they quit. How many know that God does not want us to quit? When the going gets tough, often we want to quit. And so then they stopped working, or they quit working on the temple for 14 years. For 14 years, they just stopped working on the temple. In fact, they stopped working on the temple and they started working on their own houses. Instead of doing what God had asked them to do, they did what they wanted to do. How many have ever done that? Yep. We all have. And we pick up the story this week. We discover that they are battling an attitude in this story that many of us battle. How many have ever been told that you had an attitude problem? I have been told. How many have ever thought this? I've tried living my life for God, but nothing has changed. I just want to give up. I'm discouraged. I've tried living my life for God, and I've just given up. It's like when somebody new comes to Christ, and they come to Christ, they give their life to Him, and then they start their journey. And I can think of many people in my life, and then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 months later, I say, how you doing, Bob? Or how you doing, Sally? And they say, you know what? Everything is still hard. I thought that God was going to come in and just make all my consequences go away. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. Man, I wish that all my consequences went away. But they didn't. There's this misunderstanding about God. And we think this, and I don't want you to raise your hand, but we think this. If I attend a service, if I say a prayer, and I give a little bit of money, then I'm going to be able to get out of my consequences of my behavior. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't matter if you went to church 50 times a week, and you gave all your money, we're still tied to our circumstance and our consequences. And we wake up the next day after being frustrated and wanting to quit, as we all have, and nothing has changed. And we think this. Be honest with yourself. Not out loud, but to yourself. And we think this. Is it even worth it? I mean, I've been going through the motions for years and years, and I've been doing this for years, and you know what? Really, I feel like nothing has changed. As we wrap up this series, did you see that? That pen fell, I caught it. I'm basically a ninja. As we wrap up this series, I want to just talk about this theme that is over and over in this book. It's about Israel starting and stopping. And then they start, then they stop. They start, then they stop. And they stop doing again and again what God has called them to do. They call this conditional obedience. Conditional obedience. Everyone has been caught in this trap. God, I'm in as long as you deliver what I want on time. My time. God, I'm in as long as it doesn't cost too much. God, I'm in as long as I see the results that I want to see. I'm in. And God, the moment I get uncomfortable, or I get worried, or it gets too hard, I'm out. Now, we wouldn't say it quite that clear, but how many have ever heard that old saying that actions speak louder than words? Conditional obedience. Here's my point. There was 2 times in my life that I can think of just as I was preparing that God spoke to me very clearly. One time, he spoke to me to give someone $500. The problem was I didn't like this person. Like, I'm just going to be honest with you. I didn't really like them. But I knew it was God telling me. And there was another time that I had this old car that had broken down. And some would say that I'm not that handy. So the car broke down and it was useless to me. But God spoke to me to give this car to somebody. And so I did. But that was easy. It was no good to me. I couldn't fix it. But when God spoke to me to give $500 to someone who I particularly didn't care for, I wasn't so quick to be obedient. And I didn't. Conditional obedience. I'll do it as long as I want you to support your local church. Well, I'll do it if they play the music I want them to play. If Troy comes up with just the right amount of jokes. And I often think back to the car and the money. And I often find myself thinking about what would have happened if I was obedient with God's money. It's not mine anyways. How did God want to use what I had to make a difference in that person's life? If that question isn't hard enough, how did God want to use what I had to make a difference in my life? And if that isn't hard enough, what blessing did I miss out on because I was conditionally obedient? See, the problem is we have this conditional obedience in our life. We do it if the temperature is just right. But if it's too hard, we don't. Some would call this selective hearing. Men have this. You can go to the next slide. Men have this. I mean, wives, have you ever heard of selective hearing? You say to your children, clean your room, but nothing happens. Pick up this. Husband, pick up your socks, or pick up this. Nothing. Just this blank. But if you take out a bag of chips at 8:30 at night and you try to crack them really slowly, everybody hears. You didn't hear me talk to you like 2 hours ago, and I just went, and everyone in the house goes, what's that? It's called selective hearing. And the problem is we often apply it to God's word as well. So we have selective hearing, and then we have selective obedience. See, there's a few verses on the screen, and we love to quote Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope in the future. We tune into that. Oh yeah, give me more. But then we hear Matthew 5:44, but I tell you to love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. We love to hear Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works to good for those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And we're like, yes, that's right, I claim that. But then in 1 Timothy 5:18 it says this, for scripture says, do not muzzle the ox while treading up the grain, and a worker deserves his wages. Meaning if you don't work, you don't make any money. No. I had someone in my life, I won't say who it is because they might watch this video. But someone in my life, I saw them, I said, hey, what did you do at work today? And they're like, as little as possible. Well, shine, Jesus, shine. But we have this conditional obedience, this selective hearing. If God's word is teaching and instruction for the best way to live, and we want to live the best life that he has for us, then our approach to the Bible shouldn't be about a bunch of opinions to consider. But we need to strive to walk in obedience to all his commands. So here we are in the story in Haggai. Haggai 2:12. If someone carries consecrated meat in the fold of their garment, which I can't really understand why anyone would do that, why they would have clean meat and they would hold it in the fold of their garment, that doesn't make any sense to me. But and the fold touches some bread or stew, some wine, olive oil or other foods, does it become consecrated? The priest answers, no. So if I'm carrying clean meat and it touches something else, does the other thing become clean? He says no. How many have ever been out somewhere and dropped food on your shirt? Usually if I go somewhere important, I bring 2 shirts. I'm the worst. Probably because I talk too much and I don't pay close enough attention. So often it's right on the last bite. And then I drop the food, and then I have to take a clean napkin, and then I take it and I find some water and I dip it in, and then you try to wash it, right? And then it makes it bigger, it makes it worse. But even if I do get it clean, then the cloth that I've used is now dirty. And that's what he's saying. He's like, if the meat is clean and something touches it, will it make it clean? He says, no. See, the dirty shirt makes my cloth dirty. And here's the thing that he's trying to get through to us in this couple of illustrations. That when something is clean or something is holy, it's much more difficult for something clean and holy to make something dirty holy. But it's easier for something dirty to make something holy dirty. And it says this in Haggai 13. And Haggai said, if a person defiled by contact with a dead body and touches one of these things, does it defile the body? He said, yes. The priest replied, it becomes defiled. Because dead things defile clean things. And clean things don't clean dirty things as easily. Haggai's point was this. There is power in sin. It's like disease. And it spreads easier than holiness does. That sin spreads easier than holiness does. And I say this all the time, and most of you will heard me say this. We wake up one morning and we're far from God, and we say, how did I get here? And the answer to that is very slowly. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says this, do not be misled, bad company corrupts good character. You notice that Paul didn't say good company cleans bad character. See, it's much easier to be pulled down than it is to pull up. Yep. See, there's this corruptive power in sin. It's like spaghetti sauce. It stains everything it touches. So we can think that I can go and I can be and I can do this. Then Haggai said this in 14. So it is with this people and this nation in my sight, declares the Lord. Whatever they do, whatever they offer, there is defiled or is not good. This seems very harsh. I said, whatever they do, it's defiled. It's not good. Here's the point that you need to write down today. When our heart isn't right, everything else is off. Yeah. Even if we do the right thing, if we do it with the wrong heart, it's not pleasing. Matthew 5:23-24 says, and this is how serious this is. If your heart is not right, this is how serious it is. It says in Matthew 5:23-24. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, so if you're in church, if you're in the temple, and you're offering your gift, your tithes, your offerings, and you think about a brother or sister that has something against you, before you give, he says, leave it there. Go find them. Make it right. First, be reconciled with them. Then come and offer your gift. Because he's telling us, just like in Haggai, that if we do the right thing with the wrong motive, the wrong heart. I mean, we know this is true with our children. Have you ever had two children that have gotten in a fight? Whether they're your two kids or two kids from different families, and you bring kid A up to kid B, and you say, okay, you say you're sorry. And kid A says, sorry. And you're like, no. And you march them right back and you say, no, you say sorry, you mean it, then you hug. Because this isn't awkward enough already. Because just doing the right thing with the wrong motive isn't good enough. I mean, these kids said the wrong thing, but they did it with the wrong heart. What matters to Jesus the most is the condition of our heart. It's why over and over again on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, he keeps deflecting these questions where people want to talk about these big sins. You know, what about this? And what about this? And what about murder? And what about this? And he keeps deflecting those things away. And he keeps going back to the things that everybody has issues with. He says, listen, don't worry about adultery. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. Come back to the things that we all struggle with. Like lust and hate and calling people fools. Because when our heart isn't right, everything else is off. We see this too often. We say, I'll obey you if you do what I want you to do. God, I'll obey you as long as it works out for me. I'll obey you as long as it's convenient. And then in verse 15 it says this, now give careful thought to this from the day and consider how the things were before. One stone was laid on another in the Lord's temple. So think what it was like before one stone was laid, it says. If we go back to part 1 of our series, they rebuilt the foundation and the altar. We identified with Haggai 1:6, which basically said, and I remember this, and I remember reading this and you guys shaking your heads in agreement. We drink, but we're still thirsty. We eat, but we're not full. We're putting in money in our pockets that have holes in it. We're just working and working and working and doing and doing and doing, but it's not helping. I'm still exhausted and I still feel empty. Haggai says, remember, before you built the foundations of the temple, that's where you were. Then it says this in 16. And this is a crazy verse, but listen to this, 16 and 17. When anyone came to a heap of 20 measures, there were only 10. When anyone went to a wine vat to draw 50 measures, there were only 20. I struck all the work of your hands with blight, mildew, and hail, yet you did not return to me, declares the Lord. He says, I've struck everything, so it's not going to work out for you. I'm withholding something from you. Out of context, if you read 16 and 17, it just seems nasty and cruel. Why would God do that? Is that a God that truly loves his people? Why would God stop provision when his people were doing everything they could just to survive? Maybe we should read 17 again. It says, and there's 7 important words that you can't miss. I struck all the work of your hands with blight, so they wouldn't work out, mildew and hail. Yet you did not return to me, declares the Lord. He says, I've withheld provision from you because I was trying to get your attention. Now, many of you, your mind is racing. And you're thinking, for the years and years, I've been trying to do this and trying to do this and trying to do this, and it's not working out. What's going on? Why is my finances still a mess? And why is this? And why is this? And God is saying to you today, I believe, that I want your heart, not just your actions. And so I'm withholding my provision from you. You say, well, God was punishing them. God wasn't punishing his people. He was restoring his people. See, we want to say, well, God is just being mean. Here's that God of the Old Testament again, that grumpy old man. He wasn't punishing his people. He was restoring them. He was saying, I need you to depend on me. So the field and the water is going to be dry. Then, when you return your heart to me, I will release something like you've never seen. He doesn't always change our negative situation. I don't believe God causes every negative situation. But I believe that he doesn't change every negative situation because he's trying to turn our hearts to him. I'm not saying that if something bad is going on in your life that you deserve it and God has given it to you because it's God's fault and it's your fault. I'm not saying that. We need to understand that sometimes God allows, because of sin into a fallen world, that he has allowed some bad with a purpose to give our attention, to draw our hearts back to him. Ever feel like your family is in chaos or your finances are in chaos? Ever been there when something is going wrong and you say, why me, God? Why is this happening? Why are you punishing me? I present to you today that God is not punishing us. He's restoring us. And he's saying your heart is all that really matters. You say, well, I want you to know that God is not punishing you. What really loving of this God that we speak about is that he wanted them so much that he cut off their supply. He didn't make them sick. He didn't kill their kids. He didn't do cruel things. He cut off their supply so that their hearts would turn back to him. Think of your life. I mean, as parents, as a loving parent, as God is our loving Father, what is God trying to get your attention? Have you found that your money or your time or your family is cut of supply? A loving father loves tough love. It seems unloving at the moment. It's like if I got caught driving like a maniac when I was young. My parents would then cut off my supply of gas. They weren't cruel. They just loved me. If I got mouthy because I lost my supply of gas, they would cut off my supply of curfew. And if our kids get mouthy today, it doesn't matter what age they are, let me give you a hint, this will work every time. If our kids act out and our kids don't do what we want them to do, and while we're trying to lead them, write this down. Cut off the supply of Wi-Fi.
Oh, yeah.
You will have their attention. If our kids go to school, to college, and they start to waste money on things that they shouldn't waste money on, it's not unloving that we would cut off our financial supply. It is what a loving parent would do. We don't do this because we want to make our kids miserable. We do it because we don't condone their actions, and we hope that this will restore them back to the values that we have raised them with. That we love them so much. God's not trying to punish you. He's trying to restore us. Because he wants your heart. In closing, if we go back to part 1 of our series, God was so simple. The Israelites' attitude was this: we're supposed to build it, but we don't know how. How many of you ever thought that? You know, I'm supposed to do this, but I don't know how. Give me plans 1 through 10 or 1 through 20, and then maybe I'll sit down and think about it. Maybe you're a thinker and you want to know and you want to have it all figured out. And God just gives them a very simple plan. He says, go up the mountain, bring down the timber, and build my house. He's saying, you know what, listen, don't worry about steps 4 through 10. You be obedient. You do steps 1 through 3. And then I will take care of you. And then our second week, they were in the middle of rebuilding the temple, but they got discouraged. And they wanted to give up. And God said, listen, don't give up. Be strong and work. The good news is you don't have to work by yourself. Christ in us. And today, God has one simple message for you and for me. He's saying, return to me. I want your heart. Return to me. He said, I want you to know that I will cut off your supply to get your attention. Because I love you so much. Matthew 6:33 says this: seek ye first the kingdom of God. Seek first the kingdom of God, and his righteousness will be added. Psalm 37:4. Take delight in the Lord. He will give you the desires of your heart. Matthew 22:37. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. I want you to know that this is all about our heart. Because when our heart isn't right, everything else is off. How can we be so excited about the things of God and then all of a sudden we can have these battles of conditional obedience or selective hearing? But God, it's not going my way. But God, is it worth it? But God, but God, but God. See, that's why being together in corporate worship together like we were today is so important. It's our way that we say, God, I love you with all of my heart. See, that's why it's so important to be involved in Bible study, in discipleship, whatever that looks like. Because it's setting apart time. Because the pull of the world to take holiness and make it dirty is so strong. See, that's why tithing matters so much. You say, oh, here we go. That's why tithing and honoring God with our money matters so much. Because every Thursday I make a decision. And that decision is God before anything else. You're first. Before anything. Before I go buy this, or I do this, or I eat this, or I watch this, before anything. Because every Thursday, it's a sacrifice of the heart. I am yours. You are mine. I am your beloved. See, the beauty of Haggai's prophecy, in that 3 months later, God got a hold of their heart. He says this in 18. From this day on, from this 24th day of the 9th month, give careful thought to the day when the foundations of the Lord's temple was laid. Give careful thought. Is there yet any seed left in the barn? He's saying, you still have planting to do. But he says this in 19. From this day on, I will bless you. Even though they didn't even plant a seed, God promised harvest. Why? Not because they built a temple. Not because they climbed the mountain. Because they returned to Him. Why don't we stand together? Julian's going to sing this song that I've asked him to sing. And only you can know where your heart is this morning. I'm not talking about that you're out, like living in this and doing this and blah. You understand that we can be very far from God and never leave this building? But there's many of you this morning that God is saying, I want your heart above everything else. I want your heart. And just like this prophecy in Haggai, if you return to Him and you give Him your heart, He will open up things that you could never imagine. If you're here this morning as Julian sings, and you say, Troy, I want to give my heart to Him. Not meaning that we're not saved, but I want to return my attention to him. As he starts to sing, why don't you walk to the front? Do not be shy. Do not be convinced to stay in your seat. Return your heart to him this morning.
When the music fades, all is stripped away.